everyone. Welcome back to school, and I will be your moderator for this session. My name is Kathy Chiang. I am the Assistant Director at the University of California, Irvine. And this next session is called The State of Collegiate Esports. So I'm joined with a very special guest today to do a deep dive into kind of the history of collegiate esports and kind of what it's been doing, especially at Riot Games. So, JT, could you tell everyone about yourself?
How's it going, everybody? My name is JT Vandenbree. I am a League Operations Manager at Riot Games. I am also the Operations and Championships Lead of the RSAA. What I work on mostly at Riot is I oversee the College League of Legends season. That's pretty much everything from format design and rules to kind of our operations partnerships. I'm also the event lead for the College League of Legends Championship, and I also kind of oversee our college communications and player relations. I've been at Riot since 2012. And I've worked on a bunch of stuff in between.
Awesome. So I'm going to actually take this into a slightly different direction than I think what both of us are used to. JT and I have seen each other in countless conferences and panels, and kind of had this epiphany recently that I really don't know who JT is behind this veneer of RSAA, Riot Games, especially from the collegiate side. And he said he's been there since like 2011, right? So where have you been this whole time? Like, I really want to know who this person is behind the camera. So, JT, my first question is like, what is your origin story? Like, where did you go to school? How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. So the obligatory starter is that I've been a gamer my whole life. There's pictures of me sitting in my dad's lap at like age 2, playing on a Mattel Intellivision, which was a thing. Um, I remember asking my dad when I was a little kid why people play football in big stadiums and not Sonic the Hedgehog, because to me, I loved both games and I didn't really see the difference there. Um, and I've been a competition freak my whole life. I love competing at things. I think it's super fun. I like challenging myself. I like challenging other people and seeing all the cool stuff you can do. Um, from that, when I was in college, I was a terrible Melee player, and I really loved rhythm games, and I started going to gaming competitions. I played sports and done kind of music and choir competitions in school. And I think right before I went to college, I went to my first like real video game tournament. It was actually a Dance Dance Revolution tournament, and I love that game. I still do. And the first time I went, I kind of had that like feeling of coming home. It was kind of the first time being somewhere where I was in a room full of people that played my game and loved my game the way I did, and we could complain about stuff and tell jokes, and like we all got it. And once I realized that, it was kind of like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. I didn't know how I was going to do that, but so I got super involved actually in the rhythm game scene. Started running my own tournaments. Um, my kind of personal mission is to bring the joy of competition to as many people as I can, and build the things that I wish I had when I was younger. And saying, hey, why aren't video games in stadiums? And now we're getting there. By the time I graduated college, I had run a few national scale rhythm game tournaments, inviting people from all over the country, kind of figuring out everything on my own. There was no money in this. I paid money out of pocket to make things happen, but that was sort of where I was at in college. I was an RA my senior year. Like I loved living on campus. I loved kind of helping people out and kind of making cool spaces for people to find themselves and meet people and all that great stuff. Around when I graduated college, oh, forgot to mention, went to UCSD, so go Tritons. Um, right after I graduated college, kind of all of my respective tournament scenes had been dying out. And so I was sort of on my own. I got my first job, which was kind of unrelated. I was doing web QA and SEO. And then I started playing League of Legends in 2010 and got irresponsibly hooked on that game.
As everyone
And
did.
yeah, I was playing like 15 to 20 hours a week. I mean, I love League of Legends, still do, but back then it was pretty crazy. Um, so a couple years later, on the League subreddit, a rioter did an AMA and then kind of shamelessly plugged the careers page, and suddenly I was like, oh, I could get a job at Riot. And started, trying to pigeonhole myself into every role that I saw. Of like, oh, I could be a copy editor. I could do QA. I could probably do this. And then in late 2011, the first job posting for an esports coordinator at Riot opened up, and I freaked out, and I was like, wait, this is actually what I do. So after a very long application process, I actually became one of the 2 original esports hires. So at that point, Riot had just brought people from other teams. So it was kind of the first role or esports role Riot had hired. Um, so at Riot, I kind of started as a league operations specialist. That wasn't really a defined role at the time, but that was just what I knew how to do and what I did. Um, I started working on the World Championship first. So I, with a few other people, wrote the original World Championship rules. If you remember, 2012 was the first Riot-produced World Championship. So we were kind of starting
Cool.
from scratch. So I co-wrote the rules. I helped a little bit with the format, and I also kind of oversaw the kind of on-stage referee program. There wasn't really any, structure of that. It was like we should have people on stage probably making sure things go okay. And so that was kind of one of the first big things that I was kind of put on to figure out on my own. That next year, I also co-wrote the LCS rules. When we kicked off the LCS for the first time, I created the head referee role and oversaw the kind of LCS referee program in general. I was the head ref for our international events, so All Stars and Worlds still, and I oversaw kind of all of our online LCS qualifiers because of my background as a scrappy tournament organizer. In 2014, we launched the Challenger Series, which is our minor league, which is now Academy. And I led that program for North America and for Europe. I handed that off a year later and was still working on the LCS. In 2015 was when the college program for Riot started really getting big. Michael Sherman was in charge at that point, and I had worked with him in the past a little bit when he was at Ivy Law and when he was at Well Played. Shout out to both of those words. And I kind of helped work on the design for when Riot kind of turned the college championship into a college league, wrote some rules, helped handle some competitive rulings that came up. And then 2 years later in 2017, I moved on to the college team full time as kind of the league operations lead for Riot College in North America. And since then, 2018 was, we internally joke sometimes that it was the Tizification of the college season. It's when the Swiss format came to be. It's where a lot of some of the meta structure of the season that I designed came to. And then I also became the lead for the college championship event in 2018 as well, and have been doing both of those ever since.
Awesome. Also, 2018 coincidentally when UCI won the championship.
Yep.
Might have something. No, just kidding. Yeah, I think that's that's such a long journey, right? Like you think about, your name and how it's been associated with the Riot Collegiate program and RSAA, and like I really didn't know your backstory either. Just kind of just seeing you as kind of this figure just nebulous in the Riot Games space. So thank you so much for sharing that story. I think especially coming from a UC sister school too, like that gives me a lot of pride that there's just so much stuff going on within this esports space, whether you were a part of that campus community or not. It seems like you were actually there just a little before like Triton Gaming really took off, and
I
now there's that
barely
whole
missed it.
new generation. Barely missed it. And I do hear that a lot from UCI alumni too. They were like, I just graduated when you guys started your thing up. So it's really cool seeing that you were still able to essentially like claw your way into this amazing dream career and then end up in college again after a couple more years. So has it ever felt to you like you've been not so much going backwards, but you got to the world stage and now you're working kind of back on your home turf. Like, what was the reasoning for that, or like, what are you excited about collegiate for?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me, I mentioned this earlier, but like kind of my personal mission, I call it, is to just bring competition to as many people as possible. I think competition is good for people. I think it's fun. I think it's fulfilling. I think it can make you do things you didn't think was possible. I just think it's awesome. And so for me, I joke that I worked my way down the pyramid, as you said, because I started working on the World Championship and then an NALCS and then to Challenger and now to Collegiate. And to me, it's been more and more fulfilling as I've moved kind of farther down the pyramid because it's all about just making good experiences for people that love a game. Like that's the thing that
Right.
speaks to me the most. I know how excited I always am when I enter, when I play in Clash or when I enter random competitions for games that I'm terrible at, that aren't League of Legends. Just like that feeling of game day is just so exciting. And I love knowing that, I can give that experience to tons of people and like help people find their tribes, find their community and go from there. I got married 2 years ago and my entire wedding party was either related to me by blood or people that I met through playing Dance Dance Revolution competitively and
Wow.
organizing tournaments. So like, the more I can try to share that with other people, the happier I am.
Right. And I actually love that you use that analogy of the pyramid because as you say, as you get closer to the bottom, the more you're actually reaching. So, that's kind of I feel like that's why I've stayed in collegiate esports for so long too, is just the amount of reach and kind of the personal connection, like where you can see the difference that you're making is really spectacular. So yeah, speaking of collegiate, I do want to pivot to more of what the traditional state of collegiate esports panels tend to be like. But I can remember when I was a student organizer and just kind of, going through the different generations of what collegiate support looked like at Riot Games. It was very much a push and pull, where it felt like maybe it was just one or two people kind of pushing it along in Riot. It seemed like sometimes it was something for them to be proud of, sometimes not so much. And I guess there was this kind of feeling that we had to prove ourselves as a collegiate ecosystem, that collegiate is worth investing into. It's worth being able to reach the students and reach these communities. So I was wondering if you can give us a quick, maybe like a timeline or maybe like what really struck that note internally about collegiate where Riot felt, oh, actually, we should be investing in this. It's not, a waste of time. It's not, a frivolous project. Like when did that switch really flip?
Well, the cool thing about college esports is that it started with students. Originally, it was students that were self-organizing because they thought this was important to them, and well, because it was important to them, and they thought they wanted to do something big with it. And that's what brought Riot to the space in the first place. You've probably heard it plenty of times because we say it a lot, but Riot's mission is to aspire to be the most player-focused game company in the world, and a big part of that is meeting our players where they are. If our players are telling us that something is super important to them, then we'll believe them and see if we can do something to make that better. So early on, college was a one-person team. Shout out to Jaws, Steve Jaworski, who was kind of the original college guy at Riot, under the North American community team. Really quickly, it went from students running their own competitions in 2012 and hosting a college championship. The first one, actually, Sherman worked on this as well. Lone Star Clash 2 down in Texas, which was super hype, and Riot gave some support to that. We gave them Tournament Realm and some accounts and things like that. And then, 2 years later, it had grown so much. There were so many schools involved, so many teams. It was such a big deal that, from our perspective, it was like, man, this is huge. Like, we have to get involved. And kind of the question there is, what can we do that the ecosystem can't already do? And one thing for that was, hey, we have this awesome studio, we have a broadcast team, like we can make this championship event really, really special. So in 2014 was the first Riot-run college championship after 2 years of kind of community-driven and Riot-supported events, where we took qualifiers in from CSL, from Ivy Law, actually also from TESPA before they were bought by Blizzard, and then kind of brought everybody together to have a big championship event. The top teams came to the LCS studio. We put them on broadcast after the LCS, and it was pretty awesome. And then that summer, Sherman and the team who was working on it now got a call from Kurt Melcher over at Robert Morris University, and they said, hey, we're going to offer scholarships for our varsity League of Legends team. And that was really mind-blowing because our reaction was like, you could do that? Like, cool. Yeah, heck yeah,
Right.
do that. That sounds great. And the thing that's been really special about college in general is that every time we've made a decision to invest more into the college space, we've seen that paid back several times over. Whether it's the creation of varsity programs or the growth of kind of the broader ecosystem, you know, the ecosystem has always responded to the things that we've tried to do to say, hey, we think this would be something that we really like. And they say, not only do we like that, we're going to build our own stuff because we care that much about doing well or being a part of this larger community. So that's sort of like kind of the simplest answer for why does Riot keep investing in this stuff. It's because every time we do, things get way bigger and go way better than we could have expected in the first place. The slightly
Awesome.
longer answer is the needs of Riot, like what we want to do, and the needs of players and the needs of schools all have a pretty big overlap in college. Um, I mentioned already that Riot wants to be the most player-focused game company in the world. We want to meet our players where they are, and a huge chunk of our players in North America are college students. So like already you have this big bucket of players that we want to be like, cool, you have unique needs and wants. How can we help you out? And in North America, we want to make League of Legends a global sport that lasts for generations. The way we think we have to do that in North America is to make League a generational inclusive college sport as well. We think that's just part of what sports culture is here in the US and Canada. And so, that's our biggest reason for investment in college is like, hey, we want people to look at gaming as a worthwhile hobby, a worthwhile lifestyle, and a career path. And college is a good place to do that. We want to build
Right.
things that players love and make it more than just a game. On the other hand, colleges don't want to just be an education. Colleges want to be like a life-defining moment. They want to shape healthy and successful adults. And students that are more engaged on college campuses are more likely to graduate, and they're more likely to enjoy their time. They're less likely to drop out, and they're more likely to give back in the future. So for schools, if they can make fulfilling, empowering things outside of the classroom for their students, that's going to be better for their students and better for colleges and universities. And then there's sort of the
Yes.
virtuous cycle of better students helps you get better professors, helps you get a better education, helps you make better students. And if you feed that cycle, it makes the university or the college get bigger and better and do its job better. So we want to find a spot where we are creating long-term infrastructure to help schools reach students that aren't always reached by traditional offerings. Students want to find something that can make their hobbies feel meaningful to them and make them not just a student at the university, but part of that university. They want to wear their colors, they want to be part of a community, and so on. So we're trying to build things that hits all of those needs together, that we make players happy, we keep them in the League of Legends ecosystem, we're helping make gaming more established and official. We want League of Legends and the LCS to exist for generations. And we want to do that in a way that also, helps universities make better adults and helps students, take that big step into adulthood that we're all going through when you're in college.
Right. I really appreciate how in depth you went to kind of the motivations as to why esports is good for universities, because you basically just took all the words out of my mouth and like everyone else that's been pitching esports for years and years. So love to see that you understand that motivation, understand just like how we really want to support people becoming the best they can be through something they really love. So that's great. You've talked about this a couple times now in that answer, actually, the concept of varsity programs. So obviously, esports is going to naturally evolve over time. And so far, we've seen that a big shift is, again, as you said, student organizers, very grassroots focused efforts that you and I both come from. And now there are schools offering scholarships, there are schools building arenas and facilities, hiring coaches. There's this whole ecosystem now that it feels like are we shifting to like a focus on varsity? We're seeing some third party organizers as well. Like, how is the ecosystem evolving to you? And specifically with RSAA starting up as well, we're also touching on the governance side of things. So as the ecosystem continues to change, more players are involved. How do you see, student communities, governance? Like, what are your thoughts? Or I guess Riot gave his thoughts as well on this in terms of how you can best support and still kind of bring everything together.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the first things I want to say, and we talked about this in our prep, is that a shift towards varsity programming and a shift towards being institution driven and institution focused does not mean there is no longer student leadership and that there's no longer grassroots competition and so on. This is an addition to the community, not a replacement or an upgrade or something like that. When a school comes to us and says, hey, we want to get involved in esports, what do we do? The first thing we say every single time is go talk to your students. Like, you already have dozens, if not hundreds of players on your campuses playing League of Legends, not just League, but Overwatch and CSGO and COD and Rocket League and Smash. And like, they're already there and they're already self-organizing. Like, you can just go ask them. We will know kind of high level things. We'll get kind of the trends and patterns and the things that we've seen over and over. But at the end of the day, every school is different. Every community is different. Every institution's goals are different. Not everybody wants to set up certain kinds of programs or certain kinds of topics. So like, the actual right answer is different for everybody, but it all comes with students. If you're not reaching your students, if you're just trying to bolt some other model, it's very easy to look at UCI for a great example and say, hey, they've got a great program. We're just going to do exactly what they do. And you may not have that kind of interest or those kinds of resources. There's a lot that UCI had that isn't visible that contributed to making their program the way it is. And whether those are resources or constraints, having somebody like Mark Beppe, for example, who's on the RSAA board and is the program director, helps shape that program into the best program that it can be for UCI and for the students at Irvine. And so beyond that, like from Riot's perspective, like we want to support all of it. Like we still have our club program, which is still like, as grassroots as it gets, sending swag packages for back to school, helping set up viewing parties for Worlds and stuff like that. Where it's literally all about, hey, you are a student organizer. We want to help you make better events. We want to send you things that other people can't get. We want to basically, talk to the people that are critical for that student involvement and find ways to help them directly. That program's also been shifting into, kind of answering the question, if you're not going to be a League of Legends organizer forever, and most people aren't, how can this be helpful? And so Caroline Montano, who runs that program now, has been doing a lot of things like career panels with people from across Riot Games and like helping students turn their time in League of Legends and their time in gaming into skills and learnings that will help them wherever they go. We've done something similar for the college championship before COVID, when we had people on campus, where we had media training and a career panel with open Q&As for all the teams at the college championship, because we know, except for maybe one or two people probably, like most of those players is going to be their last time or only time on stage playing competitive League of Legends. That's okay. Like that's what college is for. So we want to set students up for their future, whatever it may be. It'd be great if they stayed in League of Legends forever, but realistically, they're going to do what they want to do. So the way we see kind of that divide is that we want to be heavily involved in the things where we can make the biggest impact and we can do things that other organizations can't. So an easy example is, we have the LCS studio, we have our esports team, we have our broadcast team. It makes a lot of sense for us to make kind of this tent pole unifying event like the college championship, where we say, hey, we're going to do what we do for the LCS, for Academy, for VCT and all of our other events, and we're going to bring that to college because that's easier for us to do than a third party, whether that's student organized, whether that's a student organized or university organized or some other third party. We have all the incentives and we have the resources to say, hey, we can do this pretty easily without a huge lift. Whereas things where we can't do that is like, I can't run a great local tournament for every college that wants one. Because there's one of me, and as I mentioned earlier, like a local event is going to be very different for every community because every community has different needs or different desires or different skill levels or different resources and so on. So we have the club program because we want to empower the people that can be those super local kind of like local influencers in a way, where we say, hey, you're like the club owner of insert school here, UCSD, for example. We want to set you up so you can use your skills and your expertise to make the best UCSD club you possibly can. If I were to say, or Caroline or anyone to say, hey, this is what you should do as a club officer. Here are your programs. Here are your events. Here's your schedule. The number of times that someone's going to be like, oh, but that's finals week. And it's like, oh, well, we didn't know that, and we're never going to know that. Right. So we want to leave that space to amplify the people that are already going to do the best work in that space. And that's kind of how we see third parties as well. There are third parties that are going to be more local focused than we are, that are going to be able to serve different subsets of the community better than we can. There are also larger ecosystem needs that, we could try to solve, but it won't be as good as people in the ecosystem. A great example of that is like recruitment. We could build a Riot recruiting platform for varsity League of Legends programs. We could probably do a reasonably good job of that. But the reality is it's going to take us a lot of work and a lot of learning. And there are already people out there that understand college recruiting way better than I will, because they've been doing it for 10 years and I've been doing it for never. And there's nobody at Riot that knows how to do that better than these people in the ecosystem. So that's somewhere where we say, hey, we're going to stay out of this. Because we know there's an interest there, but we're not sure how we can drive value better than somebody else can. And similarly with governance, like we founded the RSAA mostly to make it clear that we self-govern our games. We are not looking to outsource college esports for Riot's games. This is something that is central to us So we are our own governing body. That said, what we don't know how to do is to say, hey, in order to be a varsity program, you need to do this. Because we don't really know that as well as people that are in education that have done intercollegiate athletics or have been organizing at the school level for longer. So we're, as much as it would be great for us to have a standard that says, we want to give this seal of approval from Riot that this is a good varsity program, it's hard for us to do that without a lot of work and a lot of learning and a lot of help from people that are out in the community. That's one reason why the RSAA Board of Advisors exists. So we can say, hey, you all know this stuff. Please tell us what we don't know. Please help us through these decisions and help us find where we want to be and where we don't want to be. And that's also why we try really hard to keep our ears open and go to events like this and talk to lots of people as much as we can, because we know we don't know everything and we want to learn from people that do.
Right.
That was a
Awesome.
long
Thanks for
answer,
like
so
walking
feel free
through. No, that
to.
was perfect. I did ask a really long, kind of convoluted question. So thank you for hitting all those points. I think it's really reassuring to hear from a game developer, a game publisher, that the priorities are still there to serve essentially anyone that wants to be involved in the ecosystem. But I do want to acknowledge the pain of student organizers that unfortunately still don't have that same level of attention or that level of resource dedication or support from administration. And I understand that's not, that's not your job. It's not a developer's job to go step in and be like, hey, do this thing. Your students need it. But it helps. It helps when you say that, even if your school hasn't gotten to that point yet, you're still welcome. Like, we know there's different challenges for you, but you can still sign up a club team for the College League of Legends Championships. So I think that kind of my lesson out of the past couple of years and ever since varsity has become this really formidable beast is that I think it's so important for developers and publishers to continue to think about these different contingencies as our entire scene is still evolving and kind of playing catch up to itself, because there's just so much innovation and so much change that's happening. So that's great. Talking about third parties and local events, I'm sure this is a question that comes up a lot, but the community guidelines for Riot Games, right, for community events to be run, kind of a hot topic. A lot of people support it. A lot of people are a little confused about it. So I guess just kind of, why was that published? Why was that created? Like, why was that really and you talk about wanting local groups to get involved in creating events, so that's my guess is one of the whys, but just giving you a chance to kind of talk about that a little bit, like what was the decision making behind it and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, exactly. The first thing is like the purpose of the community competition guidelines. There's twofold. One is to just put something out on the internet that says, hey, you can do all of these things and you don't need to ask us. You don't need our permission. You don't need visibility. You don't need to check a box somewhere that says, I agree to the whatever. You can literally just look at that and say, cool, I want to run a tournament between, for people on our campus, or I want to run an intramural program, or I want to run these kinds of things. And you can just do that. And we want everybody to know that like that's okay, and we want that to happen. And if you do that, like you're good. You don't have to go ask us for anything. And then the selfish reason is that before we did that, everyone would ask us. And we would have to answer those emails and have those conversations, and all those conversations. If you couldn't tell, I really like talking about this stuff, and I really like talking about why and really explaining so people understand as best I can. So all those individual conversations turn into these very long phone calls and really long email threads and so on. So like there's a logistical reason to just say, hey, if you want to do that, go do that. And if you want to do this other thing, don't do that. Which leads to the second part, which is the things we tell people not to do. And those things basically are, we're defending the spaces that we invest in. We invest in the College League of Legends season for many reasons, but we invest really heavily in that. It's my literal full-time job. And it's not just me, there are other people on the college team that work on this. We put a lot of money into this, and it's free. So it's like there's no revenue here for us, although our biz dev team is working on it, but not directly from players, and that's not why we're here. So as cool as it is to say, hey, wouldn't it be great if there were 7,000 College League of Legends tournaments all the time? The more stuff that can be an alternative to the College League of Legends season takes away from how valuable the season is. We want the season to be the best thing that it possibly can be, and that means all the best teams are competing. It's viewed as the pinnacle of competition. We want the College Championship to be this tentpole event where we kind of stick our heads out and say, hey, North American League of Legends players, there's this college program and it's dope and you should come watch our championship because it's really cool. And when there's stuff that directly competes with that, it makes it harder to do that. And you brought up the point about schools that don't have much administrative support for their clubs right now. And part of why we do the championship is we want to translate esports into a language that administrators understand. A lot of people may not understand gaming and esports still, but they can look at an intercollegiate championship and say, I understand that. I know what that is. I know why it's valuable for my school that we compete in basketball or robotics or debate club or something like that. That makes sense. And then that gets people in the door and say, cool, this esports thing is great. And we're like, yes, but there's way more to gaming than esports. And then that leads us to go talk to your students because they are going to tell you what they need and what they want and what they're already doing, and you can tap directly into that.
Right.
So that's kind of why we want to be protective of the college season, and basically say, hey, if you're doing something that could convince, let's say for example, someone's like, hey, we're gonna run a tournament at this LAN, and there's gonna be $30,000 in scholarship prizes. A top College League of Legends team, a UCI, a Maryville, a Winthrop, or so on, might look at that and say, well, we could probably skip 1 week and still make playoffs, and then we're going to have a chance at $30,000 in scholarships. Like, that's great. And then they forfeit their college season match, and everyone's like, oh, the best teams are doing this instead, and it starts undermining the whole system. And that's why we want to defend that space.
Right.
And then when that stuff happens, it's also hard for us in the pre-guidelines era that, people wouldn't come tell us that they're running an event. They would just go run it. Because the game's free and Twitch is free, and so you don't need to say, hey, I'm going to buy this thing to do that and have that interaction. So there were a lot of times where we would find out about an event that directly conflicted with the college season or with playoffs or had some element that was problematic for us as a company, and we'd have to be like, hey, hi, Tizza from Riot here. Can you change this? And for the record, our first contact with people is always like info and change. We're not looking to bring in lawyers. We don't say, hey, shut this down now. We say, hey, we have these guidelines. This is what we let people do. Is there a way you can convert from that? We work with organizers to say, they go, hey, is it okay if we do this instead? And we try to find a good happy medium, because at the end of the day, we want to make players happy, and shutting down an event sucks. We don't like doing that, because even if it's the Fire Fest of gaming, players probably still signed up for it and they're really excited, and then finding out that it's gone because Riot said so, it's just a lose-lose. So being more public about what those policies are, making them very visible and making sure people know about them, helps us avoid player pain in the long run because of that. And all of these policies and the guidelines already existed. This is basically what we would ask organizers to do if they said, hey, we want to run a summer College League of Legends season, and we'd be like, all right, let's talk about what you're trying to do first, and then say, here's where your swim lane is that we've carved out for you. So the guidelines are just they were always there. People just didn't know about them. So we wanted to be transparent and public, and let us have that conversation, because it's better to have that conversation up front before someone starts planning a major event than it is when some organization has been working on something for 3 months, and then they're like, what do you mean we can't give out $30,000 in scholarships? It's like, oh, that's
right. Yeah, because you come from that tournament organization background too, so understand it sucks to get cut short there. So it does make sense. And I'm just gonna break up the rhythm a little bit. I realized I didn't mention earlier, but we are taking questions at the end. So if anyone has a bunch of questions you're dying to ask JT, please put them in Twitch chat, because we're gonna, keep note of all of them. We're gonna address them in the last 15 minutes. So please, please, please do leave your questions. Sorry for forgetting to say that. But back to the questions I have for you. Definitely with how things have been developing. We've talked a lot about how collegiate has evolved, all the different changes. How do you see, or what are you hoping for actually with kind of the future of collegiate, the future of kind of maybe RSAA or just the collegiate season in general? Like, do you see things changing drastically? RSAA right now is going through a new selection of advisors as well, right? Like, how are you seeing that kind of evolve now that you've had about a year or maybe even more than that of starting this governance council? How has that kind of affected your season?
Yeah, the RSA board's awesome. One, because it's just composed of really smart, talented, passionate people, and it's like cool being in a room full of smart, talented, passionate people that I can learn from. Um, and also, they've helped us make a bunch of really big decisions about the season. They helped guide us on the college championship changes that we first saw this year. We announced last year, but for COVID. Um, expanding the bracket to 32 teams, adding the selection committee. Like, without the board of advisors, that probably wouldn't have happened. Maybe the 32 team bracket, but like the selection committee definitely, because that's something that we as Riot were really afraid of. We see, I'm on Reddit all the time, I'm on Twitter all the time, and when for a long time when someone brought up NCAA and esports at the same time, you kind of saw that like very angry reaction of like, keep the NCAA away, FBS is terrible, rabble, 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 and a lot of that is because it's something I learned really early on at Riot is they're mad because they care. But we saw that and we're like, all right, we're not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Like this, people are going to be really mad. It's going to be really hard to explain, even if you think it's good. And then we talked to the board of advisors about it, and they kind of asked, hey, have you ever considered doing a selection committee? For those of you who've been around for a few years, you'll probably remember the old college championship play-in, which was this like very fast, confusing Franken format, which is like, cool, we have 11 conferences and we need to get 4 teams out of them. How is that going to work? And so that was a mess, and we hated it just as much as people covering it tried to do it. And the board of advisors were like, hey, there's more to the selection committee than people being mad at it. Like, here's the value of it. And like the reality is, if people are upset, it gives them something to talk about, because there's no way to correctly fill that bracket. There's no solution. There's no right answer, no matter how well you do it, no matter how competitive the bracket is, even if every match is exactly the way it was supposed to be, someone's going to say, oh, but that other team didn't get picked and they would have beaten so-and-so and it would have changed everything. So they kind of helped us learn from the expertise of intercollegiate athletics to say, hey, it's not just the salt factory. There's a lot of good to it, and it turns out they were right. Like, the selection committee was awesome this year. We had a great group of people working on it, and I mean, just as someone who's been watching every college championship for the last however many years, like, bracket was banger, and like without the board of advisors, that wouldn't have happened. So I think long term, like, excited to keep adding more voices to the board of advisors, get a bigger variety of expertise and backgrounds to help us see more things that we don't already see from where we are. Outside of the RSAA, like, shameless plug, but 2 weeks ago we posted this big article that was basically everything I've been working on for the last couple of months, including what we're changing in 2022 and big changes in the future for 2023 as well. That's kind of a springboard for what I think kind of the best future for College League of Legends is, where there's more competition and the competition is closer. We see the best teams are playing against the best teams sooner, not just at the very end. Teams that are not the best teams, either because they're new or they're not competitive or they don't have resources, can also have a place to compete. And it isn't just 2 weeks of getting blown out until the Swiss format catches up to them and puts them with teams that are more on their speed. We also just want to do more for more students. Right now the college season supports the best 5 players or 5 to 10 players at every school, but there's way more League of Legends players on every campus than that, and we want to find a way to bring more structured competition to those players as well. And that's something that's kind of on the horizon that we're working on. We've done some stuff there with the bottom up. The club program has been doing what's we're calling Riot Grand Prix, which is basically plug and play battle fight tournaments with prizing that any club officer can just get and then use. And then it kind of helps run the format for them, and then they get RP prizing and mystery gifts at the end of it to try to help support that grassroots level. But like, I think my crazy long-term dream is that Um, College is kind of already the most inclusive space in the League of Legends esports community. We have a disproportionate number of our club officers are women, and we don't see that really anywhere else in kind of the League of Legends ecosystem right now. And I view college as a huge opportunity for us to build a more inclusive and welcoming community. And we've been kind of working quietly behind the scenes on a few things to try to make that happen. We have an announcement very, very soon, not related to college in that space.
Sneak
But Riot
peek.
is a yeah, sneak peek. You didn't hear that here, but well, you did. I didn't say anything, but there's a thing coming. Um, and we want to do more to kind of elevate the people in the college community that are already doing a great job that aren't just very good at playing League of Legends. We want to elevate
Right.
club leaders. We want to elevate people that support their communities. We want to elevate event organizers, coaches, and staff members, and so on. We want to give them more opportunities to be recognized for doing a good job, and we want to give them more support. And we want to build sort of the next generation of League of Legends coaches and analysts and so on. And we want that to come from the most diverse pool possible. Um,
Right.
so
Yeah.
I'm hoping we can, I'm stammering because I'm remembering I'm like, what's public and what's not. And most of this isn't public yet. So sorry, I can't talk
No
too much about
worries.
what we're working on, but it's my goal that we become sort of um, a central hub for kind of inclusive thinking in esports, and using that as a lever to sort of make the college program better, but also make the League of Legends esports community and overall community just more welcoming to more people, so we can get the best out of everybody.
Right. And that does sound like a great future. So thank you for all the stuff that you were able
You're
to
so
share.
welcome. Yeah.
I do want to address, I wish I had kind of a counter going of how many times we've said League of Legends this presentation, but understanding that Riot Games can now finally be proud of being Riot Games instead of Riot Game, as everyone's been memeing for
Yep.
literally a decade. So
Right
everyone's been
games.
asking, when's Valorant going to be supported? Why not now? Or is there anything you can share yet? Because I know I have read that article you just referred to, and it does say not yet. So I'm not sure if there's anything you can say, but yeah, I just
Yeah,
wanted to throw that
I
out
can
there.
go into a little bit more detail. So the answer is still not yet, but we do have, we are actively working with the Valorant esports team on what college Valorant could look like. So it's not kind of a passive like, we'll get to it. It's like we're still working on it and we don't have a good answer yet, but we know that people care. We know that there's interest, and we want to do cool stuff for our players, and our players really want us to do Valorant in college. Um,
Yes.
the main thing is that we want the game to grow naturally into an esports community. We don't want to force it, because it's really hard to, if we say big announcement, professional college esports, yada yada yada, and then nobody shows up. There's not a lot of recovering from that. That sucks, and there's also a lot of resources that we spend chasing after something that doesn't exist yet. So we're deferring to kind of the global North American Valorant esports teams to kind of figure out how best they want to build out the entire Valorant ecosystem, and then find a way for college to fit into that and support that overall. Um, we
Right.
also want to be more institution oriented, specifically for intercollegiate Valorant competition. Um, Not to say that we don't, that club competition is bad or whatever, but I think something that we recognized well after the fact is that we didn't have relationships and conversations with administrators and faculty members and esports directors at universities when we were first growing the college League of Legends season. And there's a lot of insight that we missed that would have been super helpful early on in our early on in the growth of college League of Legends. I'm still saying League of Legends several times.
Yeah. No, that is
Um,
interesting. I forget how kind of just made up College League of Legends had to be initially because it was so young and not that many people were involved. So it's interesting that you basically kind of have a second chance, right, to do
mhm.
this the right way from the beginning. So yeah,
Yeah,
did you have more to
definitely.
add? Sorry, I don't know if I cut you
Oh
off.
yeah, no problem. Yeah, I do. So I think in addition to that, like there's two things. One is that we also have sensitivity just towards shooters in schools. That is a touchy
Right.
subject for a lot of people, and the last thing we want to do is be super bullish on Valorant and then have a bunch of schools go, "Hey, this is super inappropriate, and we don't want any part of that." And now it's making us wonder, like, what you're trying to do here in college. So there's a lot of sensitivity towards that. That said, we've heard from tons of administrators that are like, hey, can we do this like now, please? This is awesome. So there's a little bit of both, but it's something we're considering. And then lastly, Valorant also has their own community event guidelines and community competition guidelines. And there are already several third-party college Valorant opportunities that already exist or are in the pipeline. So they're not a full, college Valorant season from Riot with a big championship at the end, but there's stuff out there for schools that are already wanting to get involved in Valorant in colleges. And we're using that sort of as a little bit of a pulse to say, hey, like we're giving third parties the space to start this up. And we're seeing like, if 300 schools signed up for some third party Valorant league, we're gonna go like, oh my God, we gotta get on this. So
Right.
like we are keeping a close eye on that and keeping that runway open. At least in the meantime, to learn as much as we can. And then also behind the scenes, we're having lots of conversations with administrators and with the RSAA board and with people at Riot to kind of figure out, what the needs are and how we can best build something that's good for everybody.
That sounds great. And I guess everyone that's watching, you've heard it here. It's being discussed. It's being worked on.
We're
So,
working on it.
yeah, working on it. Need some patience.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
so
want to
I'm
do it
gonna jump
right.
straight. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Oh, I just said we got to do it right.
Yes, and that is totally worth waiting for. So now I want to jump into questions from the audience. So our first question was, if there was something you wished everyone in Collegiate knew about Riot's efforts in Collegiate, what would that be?
That's a very good question. Um, Honestly, so this might be a little spicy, but a sentiment that I've been feeling a lot recently is that sometimes I want to shake some people by the shoulders and be like, hey, these are video games in school. Not that college esports isn't wonderful and special and like really important to a lot of people, myself included. But I think there's been a tendency I've seen recently, especially on social media, which brings this out in everybody, to talk a lot about things being wrong or things being bad or assuming ill intent from other people in the space. And this isn't limited to Riot, selfishly, like some of it's at Riot, but um, like we are here because we care about this and we think it's really cool. And we want the world that this came from, Nicolas Laurent, our CEO, said this at an all company meeting once. He says, we want a world where a mom will put their kids like end of game results on the fridge when they do a good job. And like you'll have the pictures of the trophy, you'll have pictures of sports and trophies and their baseball portrait or whatever. Like we want the world to look at video games the way that they see sports and the way they see other worthy hobbies that are worth pursuing and will help you out in the real world. We don't see a difference. And the reason we do everything in college is because we want to help bring the world to that point. Like that's why we're here. We're not making money off of college. We make money in the long run about keeping League of Legends players happy and keeping them around. But like whenever there's something that somebody doesn't like in college, it's probably because there's about 1,700 different stakeholders that are all pulling us in different directions. And as much as we want to build the perfect varsity competition, every year several teams, 3 to 5 teams in our top 8 are student-run club programs, and we're not going to slam the door on them. And that sometimes means we're not going to have the same eligibility requirements or the same kind of reliable schedules as varsity programs want, but we're going to stick up for our club members as well. And then vice versa, a lot of partner conferences were pretty controversial for a while because it's like, oh, why do these schools get a free berth into the college championship and we don't? And the reality is what we want to do is we want to get universities to invest in gaming and esports in the long term, because the best experience a gamer could have in college is their school saying, hey, you care about games, there's a place for you here. You can have these cool computers at a PC cafe, or we have a coach, or we have fun events or intramurals or things to support you because you care about gaming and we care about you and we want you to have a good time at our university and be the best version of yourself. And
Right.
we can't do that by making everything Riot organized, by making everything hyper competitive, by saying, oh, sorry, you're not good enough to participate in the College League of Legends season. We have to defend some of our conference partners as well, because we want that long-term vision to come to life. And sometimes that means not doing the thing that people want us to do immediately, and that's a bummer, but it happens. And so it's our job to explain what our vision is and to say, hey, here's where we're trying to go. This is part of that journey. That's part of why I wrote so many words about everything that I put out a couple weeks ago. Please read that article. But just remembering that, like, I think 99.9% of the people that I've met in college esports, whether they are students, administrators, third parties, people at the NCAA, conferences, and so on, are like here because they think this is really special and they want to do this well and they want to do this right. There's not nearly as much honest tribalism or shade or whatever going on in this space as people like to think there is. So my real request is just like treat people well, assume good intentions, and like have conversations. My DMs are open on Twitter, they're open on Discord. Like I'm around, you can find me if you look for me. And like if you have an axe to grind or if you have a question about something you don't understand, like you can come talk to me. And I'd really rather you come talk to me than tweet about how stupid Riot is because they don't understand blah blah blah. And like if you really want to tweet that, like go for it. I'm not gonna be like, don't say mean things about me because I've gotten used to it. But like the reality is like remember that nobody's out to get you. Like we're trying to work together.
Yeah, that's fair. I was actually the example you brought up about conferences. I think earlier you had said something about trying to make the league kind of accessible and understandable for people that aren't already in esports, right? And I feel like conferences are a hotbed for that. It's like some of the ways schools really do understand competition at the collegiate level. So makes sense. This next question is, what does Riot consider about organizations and events they partner with that outsiders may not understand or have visibility on? So again, back to the third party organizers or partners question.
Yeah, I think every third party that we've worked with, kind of building on what I just said, is like really interested in esports and thinks it's cool. There's different levels of investments. There are some conferences that are like, hey, this is super popular and we don't really get it, but we want to be involved. And that's one thing. And on the other hand, you have like the Mountain West Conference is a great example of that they've been doing a ton. And the MAC, the Esports Collegiate Conference, has been doing that as well, where they're investing super hard in this because they get it and they say, hey, this is just where the future's going, and we want to help steer it there. So like shout out to all of our partner conferences that we've worked with because they've all been great to work with. They've all been awesome partners and they've all been a huge part of making the college season what it is. And really just like kind of the same point is like assume good intentions. We haven't worked with anybody that is like, cool, we're here in esports because it's going to make us mad Skrilla. It's like some people think that outside because they're like, oh, this will also be good because it'll give us a lot of revenue. We have to be like, no, it won't. Not yet. Maybe, if ever. But everyone that we've worked with in the space, whether they're conferences or operations partners, Scholarship America or Battlefy or whatever, like are all in this because they care and there are people working on them that care. So for everyone that trusts Riot, like please allow us to distribute that trust to our partners because like we're pretty particular behind the scenes about that stuff. So know that we're not working with people that we don't inherently trust and believe can help us kind of bring the future of esports to all of you.
Great. And we do only have a couple minutes left, but this next question is really fast. So I think we can do this one and the next. But this question is, where did you get that shirt and where can I buy one?
I forgot how to say it. I actually was Googling this very stealthily because I was like, I know where this is. I'm going to drop it in Twitch chat. It's Prideletics. They made an esports pride shirt that got bounced around. Oh, I got yelled at by the mod, by Nightbot for posting a link. I'll just write the word, but it's Prideletics. I'm gonna try to spell it right in chat. Yeah, I love this shirt. I wear it a lot. There was a big thing where it kind of, I don't remember where it came out. I want to say like maybe a year ago. It was for Pride 1 to 2 years ago. And it just like caught on in the league community. I don't know about anywhere else, but yeah, I love this shirt. It's also very comfy.
Good shirt. It's simple and great. It looks good.
Yeah.
All right. Last question, and then we'll wrap things up. But what internships does Riot provide for college students looking to pursue esports as a career?
I don't know a ton about our internship program. If you go to the Riot Games website, you can click on the Work With Us button at the top, and there's a link to information about our internships page. What internships we offer vary from year to year. We had a couple of esports interns this year, but individual teams say, hey, I'm looking for an intern this summer. or this upcoming cycle, rather than a set list of internships that always exist. So it changes from year to year, but that information's up on the website, and you'll be able to find it.
Yeah,
Sorry, I don't have a more
everyone
detailed
use that
answer.
jobs page as a good resource. I think it's the best place to check. Quick shout out, class of 2015 intern over here. So definitely very proud of that program. So yeah, we need to wrap up now, but thank you just so much for sharing your story, sharing some of the the deep dive of what RSAA and the Collegiate League of Legends scene is all about. So is there anything last comments you want to make where people can find you? Any quick shout outs?
Yes, so you can find me on Twitter. I'm Tizla Tryhards, Tizatryhards on Twitter. You can shoot me a follow. I talk a lot about random other things, but also about everything to do with CLaw. Also, if you haven't yet, please go to the RSAA news page, rsaa.riotgames.com. Look at the most recent article about the RSAA summer preview. That's got everything we can possibly tell you about what I'm working on and what's coming up for College League of Legends. There is also an open call for feedback on the 2023 format. Fill out a Google form. It's really just who are you and what do you do in college, if anything. And I will send you a sneak peek of the 2023 College League of Legends season format for you to give us feedback on, share your insight. We want this to be a super collaborative process. So please fill that out, because the more people see it and the more people get their voices in, the better. And that's for everyone. It doesn't matter if you've been in CLaw before or not, if you've done esports before or not, if you are a student, administrator, third party, whatever. Like, we want literally everybody's perspective in here. So please fill that out. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, JT. That's all the time we have today. So hopefully all of you learned something new. But enjoy the rest of your day. There's a couple more panels coming up. So we'll see you then.